Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. President Joe Biden signs an order creating the Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley National Monument at sites in Mississippi, where in 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was lynched and an all-white jury acquitted the killers. And in Chicago, where his mother held an open-casket funeral, pictures of which went national, giving impetus to the civil rights movement. U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy suggests in his strongest language yet that the House Republican investigations of the Biden family could lead to an impeachment inquiry. The first few fiscal year 2024 spending bills are coming to the House floor, but with spending levels below the numbers in the deal to raise the debt ceiling last month, and with the potential of the House Republicans adding controversial provisions on abortion and other issues, President Biden has threatened to veto those bills. China replaces its foreign minister after only a few months in office with no official explanation. We'll get U.S. State Department reaction. And we'll preview Wednesday's House Subcommittee hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs, with Space Insider columnist Leonard David. And we'll also hear from one of the scheduled witnesses who says the U.S. government is hiding evidence of non-human intelligence. And we begin with President Biden signing the executive order creating the Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley National Monument in Mississippi and Illinois. Emmett Till was 14 years old from Chicago, visiting relatives in Mississippi in 1955, and was lynched for allegedly whistling at a white woman. The national monument will include the area in Mississippi where Emmett Till's mutilated body was pulled from the river, and the courthouse where his accused killers were tried and acquitted by an all-white jury. And in Chicago, the Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ, where the funeral was held. And Mamie Till-Mobley insisted on an open casket, so the extent of her son's torture could be seen by all. Vice President Kamala Harris led off today's announcement.
Today we gather to remember our history. We gather to remember an act of astonishing violence and hate, and to honor the courage of those who called upon our nation to look with open eyes at that horror and to act. The story of Emmett Till and the incredible bravery of Mamie Till-Mobley helped fuel the movement for civil rights in America. And their stories continue to inspire our collective fight for justice. When I served in the United States Senate, I was so profoundly honored to sponsor the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act alongside Congressman Bobby Rush. And it was an even greater honor to stand beside our President, Joe Biden, as he signed the law that finally made lynching a federal crime. So many leaders here today made that progress possible. Our history as a nation is born of tragedy and triumph, of struggle and success. That is who we are. And as people who love our country, as patriots, we know that we must remember and teach our full history, even when it is painful, especially when it is painful. Today, there are those in our nation who would prefer to erase or even rewrite the ugly parts of our past. Those who attempt to teach that enslaved people benefited from slavery. Those who insult us in an attempt to gaslight us. Who try to divide our nation with unnecessary debates. Let us not be seduced into believing that somehow we will be better if we forget. We will be better if we remember.
Vice President Kamala Harris in the Eisenhower Executive Office building next to the White House, referencing her trip to Florida last week, talking about that state's newly approved Black history curriculum. President Biden also speaking today about the need to teach accurate history and his new Till Monument that he is creating.
We should know everything, the good, the bad, the truth of who we are as a nation. That's what great nations do, and we are a great nation. That's what they do. For only with truth comes healing, justice, repair, and another step forward toward forming a more perfect union. We've got a hell of a long way to go. That's what's happening. That's what's going to happen with visitors of all backgrounds to learn the history of Emmett Till and Mamie Till-Mobley through our national monument. Look, telling the truth and the full history of our nation is important. It's important to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, to our nation as a whole. I've said it before. It was a lesson I learned coming out of not like real leaders in the civil rights movement, but I came out of the civil rights movement as a kid, as a public defender, and I used to, I used to say, think that you pass something that was good, you make hate go away. Hate never goes away. It just hides. It hides under the rocks. And given a little bit of oxygen by bad people, it comes roaring out again. It's up to all of us to deal with that. Up to all of us to stop it. Up to all of us. The best way to do this is with the truth. It's used in a different context, but I think it applies here. Silence is complicity. I will not be silent, nor will you be silent about it. Work ahead to continue the fight for racial justice and equality for all Americans. And my administration is committed to leading the path forward, and I know the members of Congress here are even more committed than that. I'm going to close with this. The reason the world saw what Mrs. Till-Mobley saw was because another hero in this story, the black press. Yes. Yes. No, I'm serious. Jet Magazine, Chicago Defender, and other newspapers and radio announcers who told the story were unflinching in the bravery with which they told that story, making sure America saw what they saw.
President Biden today in the Eisenhower Executive Office building before signing the proclamation. Also there, Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr., Emmett Till's cousin. Wheeler Parker Jr. was 16 years old and with Emmett Till that night in Mississippi in 1955. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, tweeting today, Emmett Till's murder and the courage of Mamie Till-Mobley roused people of goodwill to action, leading to one of the most significant movements in American history. This commemoration will help preserve the Till family's legacy for future generations. And a word about the process, the Antiquities Act of 1906 gives the president the power to proclaim national monuments on federal lands that contain historic landmarks, historic and prehistoric structures, or other objects of historic or scientific interest. This is Washington Today. A story from CNN, Speaker Kevin McCarthy suggested that House Republicans may be approaching the point where they'd pursue an impeachment investigation into President Joe Biden. The California Republicans' most explicit threat of impeaching the president to date. Speaker McCarthy's comments come amid a series of congressional investigations in the Republican-led House that have targeted President Biden, his administration, and his family members, most prominently his son, Hunter. That from CNN. Speaker McCarthy made his comments on Fox News on Monday night.
We've only followed where the information has taken us. But Hannity, this is rising to the level of impeachment inquiry, which provides Congress the strongest power to get the rest of the knowledge and information needed. Because this president has also used something we have not seen since Richard Nixon, used the weaponization of government to benefit his family and deny Congress the ability to have the oversight.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Fox News Monday night. Today, Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, voiced his support for this approach.
The president is the head of the free world. What it looks like this guy has done, forget the damage he's doing to this country while he's in office, but the money he's accepted, it appears, what his son's involved with, if that's not pay to play, I don't know what is. But let the evidence lead us there. And then people ask me all the time, where are the consequences? You know, Hillary Clinton, we had all these hearings. Where are the consequences? And the same thing now. It's got to be consequences. And I realize the replacement for Joe Biden is probably giggling somewhere now. So she's not an alternative, but there's got to be consequences, and it starts with the head of this country.
Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, at a news conference today. Ian Sams, White House spokesman for Oversight and Investigations, tweeted, "Instead of focusing on the real issues Americans want us to address, like continuing to lower inflation or create jobs, this is what the House Republicans want to prioritize. Their eagerness to go after President Biden, regardless of the truth, is seemingly bottomless." And more from today's White House briefing with the Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
The House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is talking more about starting an impeachment investigation into the president. What's your response to that? And if he did that, would that make any kind of cooperation with the House impossible going forward?
Look, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. I'm not going to get into what the House Republicans may or may not do. What I can speak to is what the president is focused on. He's focused on real priorities that the American families care about. He's focused on the American family, but they want to focus on his family. They can do whatever it is that they wish to do, but we're going to stay focused, we're going to stay steadfast. And there are two examples of today of how the president is moving forward. I just talked about the mental health event that the president just had, and announcing actions to expand access to mental health care and tackle this crisis, which is, as you all know, a critical part of his unity agenda that he's spoken about for the past 2 years and will continue to do so. And let's not forget, earlier today, Emmett Till, and what we were able to do, what the president was able to do to make sure that there's a monument that continues, a monument for Emmett Till and his mom, to continue to shed light on that part of our history and to tell that story so we can move forward. That's going to be the president's focus. He wants to work in a bipartisan way. He does. We have been able to do that. We have the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have the CHIPS and Science Act. We have the PACT Act for veterans. We have found ways. I think more than 300 pieces of legislation that the president has signed in the past 2 years has been bipartisan. That's what the president wants to do. That's how he wants to move forward, and that's going to be our focus.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her briefing. That reference to mental health care, the story from CNBC explaining it, the Biden administration plans to crack down on health insurance plans that discriminate against people who need mental health care and substance abuse treatment. Proposed rule published Tuesday by the Department of Health and Human Services, Labor Department, and Treasury Departments aims to push health insurers to comply with the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. That law, which was passed in 2008, requires insurance plans that cover mental health care and substance abuse treatments to offer the same level of coverage for these services as they do for other illnesses. That from CNBC. On the Biden family investigations, the Justice Department this week offering U.S. Attorney for Delaware David Weiss, who reached the plea deal with Hunter Biden on the tax and gun charges, to testify before the House Judiciary Committee after the August recess, which is after Hunter Biden will appear in court on the plea deal. An Assistant Attorney General writing to the House Judiciary Committee chair that it is strongly in the public interest for American people and for Congress to hear directly from David Weiss, and saying we are deeply concerned by any misrepresentations about our work, whether deliberate or arising from misunderstandings, that could unduly harm public confidence in the even-handed administration of justice to which we are dedicated. You're listening to Washington Today. Now to the House starting work on fiscal year 2024 spending bills, the first two up this week, facing veto threats from President Biden. NBC explaining that prompted by a rebellion from House conservatives who want to spend less than a recent budget deal and engage with culture war issues, Speaker Kevin McCarthy is setting up a showdown with Democrats over must-pass funding bills ahead of a September 30th deadline, raising fears of a government shutdown. In the Rules Committee on Tuesday, the House could consider contentious amendments on abortion, marijuana, transgender rights, diversity training, migration, and critical race theory in funding legislation for military veterans and agriculture. That was from NBC. The House Freedom Caucus members held a news conference today on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol building. Here's Congressman Bob Good, Republican from Virginia, on the spending bills.
Back in January, when this new Congress formed, when we voted in a speaker, there was an agreement to go back to pre-COVID level spending for non-defense discretionary spending. This Republican majority was united for the first 5 months of the year, passing strong Republican legislation. That's what the country gave us the majority to do, to pass Republican legislation to reverse the harmful policies of the Biden, Schumer, and then Pelosi agenda. We passed the Limit, Save, Grow, which was a significant step towards fiscal responsibility, had lots of good components to it, like the H.R. 1 energy bill, the H.R. 2 border bill, and eliminating much of the Biden reckless, woke agenda that's harming the country. And then we passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act, or what I call the Failed Responsibility Act. We failed the American people with the FRA, which essentially kept in place all the Biden spending. Everyone who voted for that bill essentially owned the Biden agenda, the Biden spending, for the remaining 1.5 years of this Congress. However, it was said by leadership at that time that we will use the appropriations process, that the FRA was the ceiling, not the floor. But we would go back to pre-COVID level spending for non-defense discretionary, and we're calling on Republicans to do that very thing. Sadly and unfortunately, there are some Republicans in the House who don't want to cut spending. Worse yet, many Republicans in the Senate want to actually increase spending. But we are committed to using every tool at our disposal to going back to the 1.471 pre-COVID level spending for non-defense discretionary, allowing defense to stay at the current levels. And my colleagues behind us and our friends at the Freedom Works are united in doing that. That the Republican appropriations bills ought to implement Republican priorities, reversing the reckless, harmful, dangerous policy of the Biden administration, and take a step towards putting us on fiscal responsibility.
Congressman Bob Good, Republican from Virginia, at a news conference with other House Freedom Caucus members, all Republican, on the first two of the 12 total spending bills that will be coming to the House floor this week. The first one dealing with Veterans Affairs and military construction, second covering farm aid, food stamps, and the Food and Drug Administration. The House Rules Committee met today to begin setting the rules for floor debate on the first spending bill. Congressman James McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, is the committee's ranking member.
Democrats and Republicans had a deal, and now Republicans are backtracking. In May, we almost defaulted on the debt because the House Freedom Caucus threw a temper tantrum about paying our bills. And while they were out here acting like children, President Biden and Speaker McCarthy struck a bipartisan agreement to avoid default. Part of that agreement was to set non-defense spending levels roughly flat for the next 2 fiscal years. That was what was agreed to. That was the deal. And that's not what we're seeing here. The appropriation bills for FY24 that we are seeing come out of committees are all well below what was agreed to with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So I guess my question is, how are we supposed to negotiate in good faith with Republicans moving forward when Republicans are not able to hold up their end of the bargain? H.R. 4366 is the first and only appropriations bill to be brought before the Rules Committee this year. And frankly, it's a complete partisan mess. It has extreme policy riders that have turned what could have been a good bipartisan bill into yet another MAGA wish list. Less money for military family housing, failing to address the VA infrastructure backlog, shortchanging PFAS remediation and cleanup, eliminated dedicated climate and military-based resiliency efforts, and this one is just crazy because Republicans now think it's woke to protect our military bases from the extreme weather caused by climate change. And of course, more MAGA culture wars, more attempts to ban abortion nationwide, deny care for LGBTQ plus veterans, and gut programs that try to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military. Mr. Chairman, as an appropriator, you know this bill will be a non-starter if it passes the House. And honestly, there is a legitimate question here on whether this bill even passes the House at all.
Congressman James McGovern, ranking Democrat on the Rules Committee at today's Rules Committee meeting, setting the rules for House floor debate this week on those first two spending bills. He was referring to the Rules Committee chair, Tom Cole, Republican from Oklahoma, who was also a member of the Appropriations Committee. Wall Street today, the Dow up 26, NASDAQ up 85, S&P up 12. From Associated Press, UPS reached a contract agreement with its 340,000-person-strong union Tuesday, averting a strike that had the potential to disrupt logistics nationwide for businesses and households alike. The Teamsters called the tentative agreement historic and overwhelmingly lucrative. It includes, among other benefits, higher wages and air conditioning in delivery trucks. UPS Chief Executive Officer saying in a statement, "Together we reached a win-win-win agreement on the issues that are important to Teamsters leadership, our employees, and to UPS and our customers." That reporting from AP. The U.S. Senate is back in session for a second week of amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, talking today on the state of the amendment process on the Senate floor.
First, Mr. President, I want to thank my colleagues for all of the good work so far on the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Act. We were very productive last week, and I hope this week can be equally so. Today, we'll begin our work by holding two floor votes, one on Senators Cornyn and Casey's outbound investment screen amendment, and then a vote on the Round-Tester farmlands amendment. Both of these amendments have been in the works for months, and I intend to vote in their favor. I urge my colleagues to do so as well. I know there are concerns on both sides of the aisle with some of the text in both amendments. Senators Cornyn, Casey, Rounds, Tester, and I are all committed to working through these concerns in the conference process. Tomorrow, we will vote on the Warnock-Budd Amendment, designed to halt debt collector harassment of our service members. Again, I appreciate the cooperation of senators on both sides as we worked to lock in these votes. And today and tomorrow, Leader McConnell, Chair Reid, Ranking Member Wicker, and I will also work on assembling a second manager's package of amendments. I hope this effort is successful. It'll require everyone to work together, and we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Concurrently, we'll also keep working on additional floor votes that we might need to finish the NDAA this week. We have a chance to show the American people that the Senate can work productively on our national defense, in stark contrast to the partisan race to the bottom that we saw over in the House. But the work isn't finished yet. We're going to keep negotiating a path forward, and the Senate will continue working on the NDAA until the job is done. I thank both sides for their efforts.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. A Washington Examiner article reads that Senator Schumer will likely have to kill several amendments proposed by the Republicans to get the military spending bill passed before Congress's August recess. The article lists three of them: Department of Defense's policy to fund travel for service members to get an abortion, blocking the transfer of submarines as part of the AUKUS security pact to pressure President Biden to ask for more defense spending despite caps that the House under GOP leadership looks to hold on to, and cutting funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the Department of Defense. That from the Washington Examiner. The Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the minority leader, speaking today on the Senate floor about the 25th anniversary of an incident where a gunman entered the Capitol building and shot dead two Capitol police officers, John Gibson and Jacob Chestnut.
Yesterday marked 25 years since a deranged gunman shattered the calm of a summer afternoon here at the Capitol. 25 years since two brave officers of the United States Capitol Police, Officer Jacob Joseph Chestnut and Detective John Michael Gibson, paid the ultimate price to keep us safe. The senseless tragedy of July 24th, 1998, robbed two families of beloved husbands and fathers. It deprived fellow officers of devoted colleagues and friends. But that day, the sacrifice of Officer Chestnut and Detective Gibson saved lives. They protected the lawmakers and staff who come here to work, the tourists who come here to encounter the heart of our democracy, and the institutions of Congress themselves. And they reminded an entire nation of the vital service the men and women of the Capitol Police render honorably every day. Time will not heal the pain of losing these fine men, but in a special way today, I know my colleagues join me in extending our sympathies to the families of Jacob Chestnut and John Gibson, and to their comrades in the Capitol Police. America will never forget their service and sacrifice.
The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell today on the Senate floor. An account from roll call reads that on July 24th, 1998, at around 3:40 p.m., the shooter, Russell Eugene Weston Jr., entered the Capitol through what was then known as Document Door and shot Jacob Chestnut. That entrance is now known as Memorial Door. Weston eventually headed towards the offices of then Majority Whip Tom DeLay of Texas and encountered Gibson, a member of DeLay's security detail. John Gibson exchanged gunfire with Weston and was fatally wounded, but John Gibson's actions enabled other officers to stop the gunman, according to the Office of the House Historian. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live Wednesday on C-SPAN Radio. At 10 a.m. Eastern, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas testifies before the House Judiciary Committee. Then at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell holds a news conference on interest rates and monetary policy. Listen on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app or ask your smart speaker to play C-SPAN Radio.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from CNN, China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang was dramatically ousted on Tuesday after a prolonged absence from public view and replaced by his predecessor in a surprising and highly unusual shakeup of the country's foreign policy leadership. The sudden move, approved by the top decision-making body of China's rubber-stamp parliament, comes as a mystery is swirled around the fate of Qin, who has not been seen in public for a month. His 57-year-old career diplomat and trusted aide of Chinese leader Xi Jinping had only been appointed foreign minister in December after serving as China's ambassador to Washington. That from CNN. The U.S. State Department Deputy Press Secretary Vedant Patel asked for the U.S. government's reaction.
On the Chinese foreign minister, they've announced that he's been replaced by his predecessor, Wang Yi. There was supposed to be a visit of Qin Gang to Washington that was in the works. Could you tell us about those discussions? You know, did they get anywhere? And you know, I guess to put a finer point on it, does the U.S. consider that the visit that was being discussed is a visit of the Chinese foreign minister, no matter who that is?
So, Simon, let me say a couple things. First, it is up to China to decide who their foreign minister is. As you know, Secretary Blinken has met with Wang Yi on multiple occasions, including on his most recent trip to Jakarta, as well as while he visited Beijing prior to that. We will continue to engage with Foreign Minister Wang Yi and other Chinese officials, and we continue to believe that keeping lines of communication are incredibly important, and it's an important avenue to manage this relationship responsibly, which is something that the international community expects of us. As it relates to any potential travel, Simon, I'm not going to get into specifics. What I will just reiterate is that at the conclusion of almost every U.S. official's visit to the PRC, they have reiterated that there's an expectation that we will continue to see high-level engagement with travel from both sides of the Pacific, and we continue to expect that to be the case. I don't have any finite travel to announce, and it would ultimately be for the PRC to announce any travel to the United States, but I'm not going to get ahead of the process on who it might be and what their title or titles may not be.
And just finally, sorry, has there been any specific communication to say with the Chinese informing you of this change, and what level did that happen at?
I don't have any other further information on this beyond what's been publicly reported.
Just to follow up
Sure.
on that, what is your take of the events in China and why he's been incommunicado for so many weeks and months? And you asked about Simon asked about communications, but has the secretary been in contact? Before we knew that he was being removed, has he been in contact with his counterpart in the recent weeks?
I have no calls on behalf of the secretary to read out. As you know, Leon, he had the opportunity to have a bilateral engagement with Wang Yi on the margins of ASEAN in Jakarta. I have no other engagements to read out. Obviously, we continue to think it's incredibly important that we maintain open lines of communications with the PRC. As it relates to our personal take, again, it is up to the PRC to determine who their foreign minister is, and I will just leave it at that.
The State Department Deputy Press Secretary Vedant Patel at his news conference today at the State Department in Washington. A New York Times article reads, early on, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs claimed that Qin Gang had health problems, but the brief announcement from the National People's Congress Standing Committee, a council of China's legislature that formally appoints senior government officials, did not mention health or any other reason. His fate has become a huge topic of speculation on social media, with many commentators focusing on his personal life and a potentially compromising relationship while he was an ambassador to the United States. That from the New York Times. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo was scheduled to talk about U.S. trade policy with China and other nations in the Indo-Pacific region at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., but she barely got into the program today when a group of climate change protesters interrupted.
For the 5 years before President Biden took office, the United States was not present economically in these regions. We didn't even, have a framework for engagement, I would say. Pull out of...
We need clean air, not another... We need clean air, not another billionaire. We need clean air, not another billionaire. We need clean air, not another billionaire. Hey, stop it! We need clean air, not another billionaire. We need not another billionaire. We need clean air.
Today at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., climate protesters interrupting the Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. The protesters did not stop, so the secretary and everyone else in the room, and the Secret Service with her, went to another floor of the building to continue, and some of the protesters were arrested. From AP, a Russian fighter jet flew within a few meters of a U.S. drone over Syria and fired flares at it, striking the American aircraft and damaging it, the U.S. military said Tuesday, the latest in a string of aggressive intercepts by Russia in the region. A senior Air Force commander said the move on Sunday was an attempt by the Russians to knock the MQ-9 Reaper drone out of the sky and came just a week after a Russian fighter jet flew dangerously close to a U.S. surveillance aircraft carrying a crew in the region, jeopardizing the lives of the 4 Americans on board. That from AP. The Pentagon's Deputy Press Secretary, Sabrina Singh, getting a question about this at her news conference.
A question on the overflight of Syria, Russian aggression that just happened again. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the Pentagon thinks is the reason for the increased Russian activity, particularly since it seems to be getting a bit more dangerous with the manned aircraft last week and now with the flare that struck the drone today? Is there a sense that what this is related to, why this is happening?
Thanks, Lita, for the question. I can't speak for the Russians and why they're continuing to engage in this unsafe, unprofessional behavior. But we are seeing, I would say, an increase in that. Just on the 23rd, as you mentioned, we had a Russian fighter aircraft fly very dangerously close to one of our MQ-9 drones that was on a defeat ISIS mission. It's just yet again another blatant disregard of of how to operate and flies in the face of operating safely and professionally, and continues to distract from our mission there, which is to defeat ISIS. And I think we've said this before, but the Russians know where we operate. There's no excuse for how their forces continue to harass our MQ-9s after years of U.S. operations in the area. And so, again, we call on the Russians to conduct their ways in accordance with international law.
The Defense Department Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh in her audio-only news conference today. From Reuters, the U.S. State Department is aware that Trevor Reed, a former U.S. Marine who was detained in Russia and then freed in a prisoner swap last year, was injured while fighting in Ukraine, the State Department deputy spokesperson Vedant Patel said on Tuesday. Patel told reporters Mr. Reed was not engaged in any activities on behalf of the U.S. government and that he was not aware of any communication offered to the U.S. government on Trevor Reed's travel plans to Ukraine. A U.S. House Oversight Subcommittee will be holding a hearing on Wednesday on unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, also on unidentified flying objects, UFOs. 10 a.m. Eastern, you can listen and watch live at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. One of the witnesses, David Grush, former National Reconnaissance Officer representative at the Pentagon's UAP Task Force, was interviewed last month on News Nation.
You are alleging that the US government has been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life.
I would couch it as non-human intelligence, NHI, like we like to say in our language.
Why do you say that? Why do you say NHI?
I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location, and I couch it as somebody who studied physics where maybe they're coming from a different physical dimension as described in quantum mechanics. We know there's extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, etc. And there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Yeah.
Just let me cut to the quick though. Mm-hmm. You're saying there is an intelligent species engaging with this planet?
Yes, that's potentially extraterrestrial. Yeah.
I speak for everybody sitting at home. That is a shock.
It was to me, and I had a lot of sleepless nights.
David Grush, a scheduled witness for Wednesday's House Oversight Subcommittee hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, also known as UFOs. Joining us for more on this hearing is Leonard David, a Space Insider columnist. Thanks so much for being on Washington Today. Will you be watching tomorrow's hearing, and what do you expect?
Well, I think I haven't a clue, and that makes it more exciting. This is one of three that we've had in recent times, plus NASA doing its own study. So this is a pretty, eventful undertaking by Congress. As far as I know, there's still three witnesses. They're all credible with incredible perspectives. So we'll see how this fleshes out after the hearing.
Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Indiana, has been very outspoken, saying this hearing is going to be different than the previous ones. And also, he said the Pentagon has been stonewalling him. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm a survivor of 30 years in Washington, D.C., covering space and military space activities. And, trying to claim organized effort there is maybe a little over the top. It's a very complicated process of oversight committee hearings and Pentagon offices that have three letters, and you never know what you're dealing with there. So I don't know about stonewalling. I'm not quite there yet. I think we're coming to grips with something that's significant, and I just hope the transparency of the hearing will help nurture the potential that we're not alone in the universe.
You just referred to dealing with something significant, and you referred to the witnesses as credible. Is it possible that there is non-human intelligent something, as David Grush mentioned, in the government's possession?
Well, one thing that I'm kind of not there on the same page as a lot of the UFO and UAP people is that there may be two different phenomena going on here. UFOs has a tremendous backlog of folklore, Roswell incidents and occupants and these kind of stories, whereas the UAP thing may be a totally different kind of beast. I'm not quite sure I put the two together. So we may have, these Navy pilots describing something very anomalous, and where the other witness has been briefed by people that supposedly know. As far as I understand it, he doesn't have direct hands-on, I got videotapes or something. So we'll see where that goes. But I think putting the two together for me right now, UFO, UAP, is maybe we're dealing with two different things.
We're talking with Leonard David from Space Insider. Is this possibly a secret government program similar to what was going on in the 1950s with new technology?
Well, I think that card has to play out, and that, getting back to the stonewalling thing, I mean, there are classified programs that are in process. I'm old enough to remember when they unveiled the U-2 and the Blackbird, the YF-12A. These were all hush-hush programs, and that was in the 60s, so things have progressed over the decades. And that's their job, a new kind of aircraft, new kind of capability. So perhaps some of these sightings may turn out to be a classified project that it remains secret to this day.
Finally, as you plan to watch tomorrow, what one question do you have that you would like to have answered?
Where do you begin? Let's see. I think clearly the Navy pilots have seen something, and again, that understanding what that is and what the instrumentation is really projecting there is one thing. And then you have this whole potential of alien visitation, and that's a totally different kind of issue. The thing that always concerns me, though, not to be funny or flip, but you got to wonder why these crashed UFOs can come through interstellar space and run out of brake fluid or something, and they're bad pilots or something. Anyway, having a lot of these crashed objects, from exotic worlds other than our own, it's a stretch yet, but there is something there. There is something there, and I wish I knew.
Leonard David, a longtime space journalist, a columnist for Space Insider. Find his work at space.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the House Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee on National Security hearing is Wednesday, live, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can listen and watch on cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. The title is Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Implications on National Security, Public Safety, and Government Transparency. From the New York Post, President Biden's nearly 2-year-old German Shepherd commander bit 7 people in a 4-month period after former first dog Major was ousted from the White House over similar aggressive behavior, according to internal Secret Service communications reviewed by the Post. The emails were released under the Freedom of Information Act to conservative legal group Judicial Watch. More on this from today's White House briefing with Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
It seems that Commander Biden has a bit of a biting problem. Can you give us the latest and also any plans for him to perhaps make a move, go stay with some family and friends as Major Biden, the previous dog, did?
So as you all know, the White House complex can be unique and very stressful. And that is something I'm sure you all can understand. And it is, as I just said, it is unique and it is stressful for all of us. So you can imagine what it's like for a family pet and family pets more broadly. And so, look, the First Family is working through ways to make this situation better for everyone. I think there was a statement that came out of the First Lady's office from my colleague over there, Elizabeth Alexander. So I'll just kind of lay out a little bit of what she put out in her statement. So they have been partnering with the Secret Service and executive resident staff on additional leashing protocols and training, as well as establishing designated areas for Commander to run and exercise. According to the Secret Service, each incident referenced was treated similarly to comparable workplace injuries with relevant notifications of reporting procedures followed. And so the President and the First Lady are obviously and continue to be incredibly grateful to the Secret Service and the executive resident staff for all they do to keep them and their family and the country safe. I don't have anything specifics on any changes to Commander's whereabouts, so I'll just leave it there.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporters today. The U.S. Secret Service Communications Office putting out a statement. For the past several presidential administrations, the Secret Service has navigated how to best operate around family pets, and these incidents are no exception. We take the safety and well-being of our employees extremely seriously. As such, we are aware of past incidents involving first family pets, and these incidents were treated similarly to comparable workplace injuries, to include the relevant notifications and reporting procedures followed. And the statement goes on that special agents and officers neither care for nor handle the first family's pets, but continuously work with all applicable entities to minimize adverse impacts in an environment that includes pets. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories being talked about in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.